Hi, friends, and welcome to the Peace of Living podcast. I'm your host, Allison Bell, and I am all alone today. Unfortunately, Jason has yet again succumbed to some other virus. Apparently, we are just playing virus bingo in our house this winter time, and we are headed for blackout in more ways than one. But anyway, I just feel bad. It's Valentine's night, no less, and he's just been sick all day, not feeling great. So poor guy. I thought about maybe just waiting and seeing if he hopefully felt better tomorrow. We could record together, but I'm just going to give him the week off and hopefully just share a quick little message with you based off of some experiences that I had this past week that I haven't had a chance to share with anybody but Jason. So selfishly, this is kind of my opportunity to record this for myself and for anybody who's interested, because I did have kind of a cool experience that I didn't want to forget about, especially while it's still fresh on my mind. And it's interesting too, because it has a lot to do with what we talked about last week, which was the Book of Mormon. And I'll back up by saying that I had a really fun week last week, fun/scary/busy/exhausting. I had a really cool opportunity to go on my first ever work trip. I mean, here I am, 34 years old, and this is the first time I've ever traveled for work. So I usually am just hanging out in my basement and writing things on my computer, but I got invited by one of the outlets that I write for to represent them at a special event being hosted by Minnie, as in Minnie Cooper. That's part of the BMW company. They have a racetrack out in Palm Springs. Well, technically it's in Thermal, California. And they have a new program there, and it is specifically put on by Minnie. It's called the Minnie Manual Driving School. And this obviously is for people who wanted to learn how to drive a manual transmission car and maybe haven't done well with it or wanted to relearn it or whatever. And I am always a little bit embarrassed to admit that I never mastered that skill. I mean, I get the concept of it. I had tried it a few times before, but honestly, the last time I tried to do it, and I wrote all about this in the review I posted. If you want to check it out, go ahead and Google it. It's on A Girl's Guide to Cars, and it's under my name and the Minnie Manual Driving School. But anyway, Jason was trying to teach me how to drive our old manual Miata, and this was when we were newlyweds, and I was still trying to feign perfection in every aspect of my life. Just kidding. But my ego was a little more tender in those days, I guess. And I was really, really embarrassed of the fact that I kept stalling this dumb car over and over again. And it was a little traumatic for me. And I didn't think I was ever going to pick it up again. So I guess the universe got the last laugh because, like 9.5 years later, I was being sent to California to learn how to conquer this demon from my past. And anyway, this is not a podcast about whether or not I mastered manual driving. You'll have to check out the article to find out. Just kidding. But it is actually about events leading up to this trip that I got to take, because I was nervous to go on this little work trip for a number of reasons. One being driving a manual had some negative feelings associated with that from my past, but also just like traveling alone and away from the kids and being on this work assignment and just wanting to do a really good job and knowing that I was going to be meeting a bunch of new people. I kind of had this repeated feeling of like, I'm going to have like a missionary opportunity probably, because I would be willing to bet that I'm the only member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that's going to be on this trip. It wasn't a very big gathering of journalists, and they had influencers and a few like actors there as well, which was kind of cool. But I kind of just had this feeling of like, I need to like prepare myself as spiritually for this, because, I don't know what kind of opportunity I might have to talk about the gospel, but I want to be like ready for it. And I didn't know what that was going to look like, obviously, but having just recorded our Book of Mormon episode, like the night or two before I was leaving on my trip, as I was packing all my things the day that I was going to the airport, I thought briefly, like, should I pack a Book of Mormon, like a hard copy of the Book of Mormon? Because we have a few extra on hand, and we always do. And we've typically traveled with them in the past. And I thought for a second too, like, well, I mean, these days you can just send people to the app. They can just download it on the App Store, and they instantly have not just the Book of Mormon, but they have like the whole scripture canon that we believe in all together, which is kind of cool. But at the last second, I was like, I'll take the hard copy just in case. And I guess I'll find out why later. And so Jason drops me off at the airport, and I'm feeling immediately like homesick and sad because I just am super attached to my house and my husband and my kids. That's my life. And I was sitting at the gate, waiting for the plane, all that, and wasn't really like engaging with anybody around me. Not that anybody really does that in an airport anyway. Everybody's kind of in their own zone. But when we finally did board the plane, I was sitting on an aisle seat, and these were just, 2 seats on either side. And so, 2 seats on one side of the plane, 2 seats on the other side of the plane. So it's a really small, tight little plane that we were on, and I had an aisle seat. And the plane was pretty well full, and it looked like they were starting to close things up, and there was nobody sitting next to me in the window seat. So I thought, oh, cool. Like, this is great. I'm going to be able to sit here quietly by myself and just sort of relax. And right as I was thinking that, I suddenly heard a voice, like this kind of gruffer, older voice, be like, I have the window seat. And I turn and look, and there's this tall man with red hair that's about shoulder length, and he's got facial hair, a green bandana, and he's got a long black trench coat. And it didn't seem like scary or anything to me, but it just maybe not like somebody that I would bump into on an average day. And so I moved out of the way and let him take his window seat. And that's when I just started to get that feeling, that sort of like uneasy feeling of, oh, I think I'm supposed to talk to this guy. But I was getting nervous because I have a little bit of claustrophobia. Thanks, Mom, for that one. And being in a tight, closed plane, it kind of triggers it a little bit. So I was kind of taking some deep breaths and trying to think some soothing thoughts. And unlike people all around me, like I wasn't pulling out my phone. I wasn't really distracting myself with anything. I just kind of had my hands on my legs in front of me and was just sort of staring straight ahead. I probably looked so weird to this guy or to anybody that might have been noticing me. And for the first several minutes, like we're talking 10, 15 minutes of taxiing. And then like, as we're getting on the runway, I didn't say anything. And I was just like staring straight ahead, feeling increasingly uncomfortable because I know I'm supposed to talk to this guy. I know I am. And yet, like, I have no clue what to say, no clue how to start this random conversation after sitting here in awkward silence for like 15 minutes. And in the meantime, he was kind of fidgeting around and kind of cleared his throat a few times and sighed a few times. And I kind of got the impression that like maybe he might not have been like super comfortable with flying. I wasn't sure, but he like popped a painkiller of some sort. And so I don't know. I just kind of, from his body language and everything, I was gathering like he was not totally restful himself. And so I sat next to him, and as the plane was about to take off, I kind of said this silent prayer in my head, and I was just like, Heavenly Father, if you want me to talk to this man, you have to help me because I don't know what to say. I'm terrible at small talk. I hate striking up conversations with random strangers is not my forte. Even as a missionary serving in Panama, it was always hard for me. It always felt unnatural to just suddenly butt into people's business, because I'm very much an introverted person myself. But I said that little prayer, and then I swear I must have been like being pushed by an angel or something, because like my head turns toward the guy and I just said, so do you like flying? It was so just dumb little icebreaker thing, but he kind of like got this surprised look on his face and turned and looked at me, and like he couldn't believe that I was talking to him all of a sudden. And he was just like, well, it's efficient. and I kind of chuckled at that response. And we went back and forth for a minute about like, plane rides and the claustrophobia and all that and yada, yada. I don't know. It was definitely some small talk going on for a minute. And of course, eventually it rolled around to like, well, where are you headed? And I found out that he was going back home to Palm Springs, and that I was going on a work trip. I shared with him, and that I was actually from here in the Salt Lake City area and was born and raised. And so he's the one who naturally took it there. He was like, oh, so you must be, if you've been born and raised here, you must be one of those Mormons. And I just kind of smiled, and I'm like, this is the part where I say, actually, we don't call ourselves Mormons anymore. We're members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But I didn't do that right away. I just kind of smiled, and I was like, yeah, I'm a member of the church and have been all my life. And he was asking like if I'd served a mission, and he had just gotten back from a trip to India, and he had spent some time in Brazil. Anyway, he apparently is this world traveler, and he had seen some missionaries in Brazil, and he was vaguely familiar. And he said that he had actually been born in Logan, and that he got this kind of funny look on his face. He's like, yeah, my mom, she's what you would call a Jack Mormon. That's when someone stops going to church. And I'm like, oh, yeah. I'm like, I'm familiar with the phrase, with the term. And so, it was pretty easy to gather right off the bat that obviously that he did not practice or belong to our church anymore by choice. And in his own words, he was, quote, going down a different path. And so we talked a bit about the church and stuff. And again, I wasn't pushing any of this. It was merely just me being like, hi, I'm from Utah. And then it was blah, 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 all this stuff about the church. And he knew a lot, like a little too much, honestly, because he was diving into obviously the thornier parts of church history that people always like to bring up. And the things that I don't have direct answers for, that I just have to be like, you're right. Like that's a hard thing for me to answer. And I don't know how to explain that to you, frankly. But he was very kind. He wasn't like attacking or anything. And so I would share a little bit about our thoughts on what we did. And then I noticed, was like clutching this gold coin in his hand. And I just happened to ask him, I'm like, okay, so you don't go to church, to my church, obviously, but what do you believe in? Like, what do you have any religious views? And he showed me his gold coin, and it had the name Meher Baba on it, which some listeners may be familiar with. I will admit that I wasn't. I didn't know who that was, but he told me that essentially Meher Baba, and I've looked him up since then, but he was basically an Indian religious leader from like the 1930s to like the 19, I should have checked his date. He died a while back, but his whole thing was that he didn't really have like a religion per se, but rather he kind of subscribed to a bunch of different religious beliefs and invited all religions to kind of come together and be united under him, I guess. Like he saw himself as kind of like a reincarnate of the Great Spirit, or on the same level of like the Buddha or Muhammad or even Christ. That's how he viewed himself, that he was this religious leader meant to organize people. Anyway, he took like a vow of silence for several decades. And anyway, just a really fascinating individual, fascinating belief practice. As far as I know, it doesn't even have like a name. He's just like the leader of a bunch of followers who just liked what he preached and followed him. And so that was actually why my friend was coming back from India, is he said that he had felt kind of distanced from his beliefs. And so he wanted to get recentered. So he took sort of a pilgrimage back to India where Meher Baba was buried. And he said that it allowed him to like reconnect with him. And so, like I thought that was kind of cool that he had his own beliefs and convictions, and so did I. And we shared a bunch of stuff back and forth a little bit. And I did eventually bring up to him, because he kept using the term Mormons. And I said, well, yeah, I mean, I probably should clarify that like the name of the church, the official name is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And Mormon is more of a nickname. And he's like, oh yeah, because of the Book of Mormon. I'm like, yep, that's the one. and he's like, oh, it's the book that Joseph Smith wrote. I'm like, well, not exactly. He translated it from an ancient record that he was given, and trying to just figure out exactly how much I'm going to tell this random stranger on the plane who seems to already know so much. And he jumped in with, oh yeah, the Mormons, it's easier. It's just easier for people to say Mormons rather than Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I get it. But again, for all listeners, we do emphasize our belief on Jesus, not just on the Book of Mormon. But anyway, he said the members of our church believe that Jesus came to the Americas, and that was such a unique idea, and that he didn't know of any other record that said anything to that effect. And I was like, well, yeah, like you're right. It's true. I mean, we had this unique record detailing an account of Jesus Christ visiting the ancient Americas after he had been resurrected. And the cool thing was that after I had this conversation with Jason the couple nights before about the Book of Mormon, I was all prepped and ready to go with my story to him about like how this came to be, that, it really just kind of makes sense that if there was a biblical record over on that side of the earth, and that if Jesus's death caused like darkness and earthquakes and everything, that the same things were happening over on this side of the world, and people here kept a record as well. And if we believe in Jesus as the divine being, then doesn't it make sense that he would want to go visit all of the children of the earth and not just in one particular part? And so anyway, I was sharing that with him, and he was kind of nodding. I could tell he was maybe a little skeptical about stuff, and I don't blame him. I know if I was hearing about all of this for the first time, it might sound strange to me too. I get that. But I asked him, I'm like, have you ever read the Book of Mormon? And he got a sheepish look on his face, and he was just like, well, no. And like, he knew a lot about the church, but he hadn't actually read the Book of Mormon. And that's an interesting thing, because I feel like a lot of times when there are people who know a lot about the church, but ironically, like they've never actually read what we believe, like from cover to cover, at least the Book of Mormon. And so I told him that there was an app that he could download that would just instantly give him the whole Book of Mormon and other scriptures that we believed in as well. And he said, "Oh, no, I don't do any of that stuff." And I just nodded and I'm like, "Okay, well, things are starting to make a little more sense now." And I pulled out that hard copy of the Book of Mormon that I had in my bag. And I was like, "Well, you know what? I just happened to be traveling with this hard copy of the Book of Mormon. I try to travel with one wherever I go. And I'm very happy to give this to you so that you can read it and maybe understand a little bit more about what I believe." And he goes, "Oh, only if you sign it first." And I was like, "Oh, yep, of course, sure. Like, I'd be happy to write a little note on the inside cover," which is perfect because that's typically what I would do as a missionary. And what a lot of people that I know do is, as you give a copy of the Book of Mormon, you write down your testimony inside that front cover for whoever it's just the kind of this nice tradition of whoever you're giving it to know like, hey, this book means a lot to me. And it's not just like every other common book. Like, this is a really special one. So anyway, I was about to start signing my testimony, my name on the inside cover. And then I thought, I'll bend down the page of 3 Nephi 11 so he knows where he can read the account of Jesus coming to the Americas. And so I started to fold the page down. And I was like, hey, so that event that we were talking about Jesus visiting ancient America, it's in this chapter right here. If you want to read this right away and you can go back and read the rest of it later, that's fine too. So as I'm folding down the page, he goes, "Well, why don't you read it to me?" And I kind of was like, "Oh, no, it's okay. Like, you can take this home with you. Like, this is your copy to keep and you can read it on your own time and, don't worry about it." and he goes, No, I'd love for you to read it to me out loud. And I'm like, "Right now?" He goes, yeah, right now. And he pulls out some like special glasses of his that I assume he's got some vision issues, and they weren't like reading glasses. They were like, I don't know how to describe them. They're like the glasses that the optometrist gives you after they've dilated your pupils and they need to block out the light. So I don't know what his visual ailment was particularly, but he pulled those out so that he could like follow along with me as I was reading 3 Nephi 11. So here I was on an airplane and surrounded obviously by people, and I crack open the Book of Mormon and I'm just reading out loud 3 Nephi chapter 11. And I'm very aware of the fact that like people around me can definitely hear what's going on. I mean, it wasn't like it was super silent on the plane. There were people talking around me, but I mean, if you were within a few feet, like you knew someone is reading something. And so I just kind of laughed inwardly as I'm reading this book out loud to him on the plane, trying not to focus on like how uncomfortable and unnatural this situation is for me. I'm like, okay, I love this book. I need to focus on that and just read it to him. And, it was neat because like he was nodding at some of the verses that he thought was really cool. And then there were a couple verses in there that didn't rub him so well. And it was, there's a verse in 3 Nephi 11 that talks about like all who aren't baptized or who don't follow this pattern of baptism will be damned. And yeah, that's strong language. I can understand that. And he did not like that. He shook his head kind of vigorously and was like, no, that's not true. No one's going to be damned. And I tried to explain to him like, well, you're right. Like we don't, this makes it sound a lot angrier than it is. It's really not. We believe that God is loving and fair, and that what he means by this is that like Everybody is going to have the opportunity to follow him and become as he is. And we believe that that is like spiritual progression into the eternities. And before I could really explain it in full, like he was a very chatty individual. So I didn't get a lot of opportunity to go in depth in my explanations before he was moving on to other things. But I almost got through the entire chapter of 3rd Nephi 11, but then he stopped and he pulled out his little booklet of scripture or beliefs, whatever you want to call it. It was like this really thin little white handbook, and it was full of a lot of the ideals or the tenets, I don't know what you want to call it, the beliefs of Meher Baba and his followers. And it was neat because I read through a bunch of them, and there were a lot of things in there that were, pretty closely aligned to what I believe. And some of them were like, when you're helping your fellow beings, you're helping God. And there was another one that was like, because Meher Baba, he grew up in the Zoroastrian religion. So Zoroastrianists, I don't know what the people who believe in that religion, they believe in good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. And if I'm being totally honest, I have the movie Bohemian Rhapsody to thank for me knowing that. But anyway, I got really excited when I was reading these because I was like, hey, friend on the airplane, I don't want to use his name just for privacy's sake. I said, did you know that I believe a lot of what I share a lot of these same beliefs. In fact, a lot of this is echoed in the Book of Mormon in other chapters. And I took him to the Book of Mosiah into chapter 2 with King Benjamin delivering his address to the people about how when you're in the service of your fellow beings, you're only in the service of your God, and how that was exactly what his belief was saying. And then, a couple chapters over in Mosiah chapter 4, verse 30, when it talks about watch your thoughts, words, and deeds. And I'm like, hey, see, like we're not so different. Isn't this cool? And I mean, I thought it was really neat. And he, like, I don't think that he was like totally open to the idea of like accepting all these new beliefs. Like, I think he was just a really friendly man who was curious and definitely felt very passionate about his own beliefs. And, probably as equally passionate as I was about mine. It was how he felt about his beliefs in Meher Baba. And so we just sort of had this exchange back and forth. And, I mean, like the things that he would ask me, I almost started to wonder, like, are you for real? Or are you like a plant? Are you a figment of my imagination? Because I almost feel like the questions that he was asking me were like textbook MTC, Missionary Training Center questions that I got as a training missionary, that I'm like, okay, investigators to the church, they might ask you these things typically. And it was like, boom, 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 all these things that he kept asking and bringing up and saying that I was just like, I don't even know what's going on right now. This is crazy to have such an open conversation with somebody. Like I will be honest, I have not had like such a blatantly bold conversation with somebody about the church who wasn't a member of the church probably since my religion. Like I haven't had the opportunity to just sit down and like flip open scripture and read it with them and like answer their questions and stuff. But it was such a cool feeling, like an old muscle that I hadn't used in a long time, that I'm like, oh yeah, I used to do that. And it felt really nice to be talking about Jesus and my beliefs, because I mean, there are people that might think it's weird, and I'm sure there were people that were sitting on that airplane around us who thought, who is this girl who's like so eager to get the next convert for the church? Like these Mormons just want to baptize everybody. And well, yeah, we do. But that's, I mean, this is coming from a pure place, like truly from my heart. I I know and I can say with complete confidence that I believe in Jesus Christ, and I believe that the Book of Mormon teaches all about him. And yeah, whether or not something happens with this friend of mine on the plane, like whether or not he like reads the Book of Mormon and suddenly starts talking to missionaries and gets baptized, like that's totally out of my hands. And I'm not sure that that was even like the main point of our interaction that day. I don't know, frankly, what the main point was of it. I don't know what the grand scheme here was of God. I just know that I was prompted to talk to him, and I just acted on that prompting. And I'm grateful that I did. And so as we were landing, we talked the entire flight. I mean, it wasn't a super long flight getting to Palm Springs. It was about an hour and 40 minutes or so. But we talked that almost that entire time, minus the awkward 10, 15 minutes on the runway when I was being weird and quiet. But as we were landing is when I finally got a chance to like write him a note on the front cover. And I just very simply was like, thank you for discussing your beliefs with me. I really enjoyed like sharing these things with you. And when it comes to my beliefs, it's really simple. I believe in Jesus Christ, and I believe that this book teaches of him, and it's blessed my life. It's made me a better person from reading it. I know that it brings me peace. It brings me closer to him as I read it. And I hope that it will do the same for you. And then I signed my name and included my phone number, and with a note that said like, feel free to call me if you want to talk some more about it or whatever. And I handed him the book, and he was so nice. He just kissed the front cover and put it away safely in his bag. But like, I was really touched that he treated it as something really special, that like he knew that it meant a lot to me. And whether or not he even reads it, I don't know. That's out of my hands at this point. But he recognized in that moment that it was something special and important, and it's out there. And I'm just grateful for that experience. And I may not ever see him again, and maybe nothing will come of him taking that Book of Mormon. But I will say this though, for as nervous as I was about that trip, I felt like a boost of confidence after having acted on this prompting and trying to do what the Lord wanted me to do in that moment without even understanding it, that I know for sure that God immediately blessed me for that. I could feel so many kind things happening to me. Number one being that like the whole next day was super stressful, out in the heat, working all day. I'd had very little sleep. I'd had so many triggers for a migraine that day, and I'm susceptible to those. And I remember praying specifically, Heavenly Father, I've tried really hard to do what you wanted me to do. And if that merits any blessing at all, if I could just ask that my head be spared from pain today, I would be so grateful for that, because I knew that it was going to be a tough day. And not only did I not get a headache that day, but I felt really good, and I had plenty of energy despite a lack of sleep for the last 2 days. And I had a really good experience, and it was fun. I wish I could say that I had more missionary opportunities while I was there in California, but it all went so fast, and everybody is busy getting together their different stories for their different outlets, that I really didn't get much of an opportunity. And I didn't want to be that person that was forcing a conversation about religion out of nowhere. So I talked about being from Utah, and it was very evident that I didn't drink alcohol. I was the only one not drinking, the only one not having coffee. So I definitely stuck out in that regard. Although they probably just thought I was pregnant or something, but I am not, P.S. But yeah, I just tried to be a friendly, good person, because I feel like that's the main message of the gospel, is just that we live what we believe. And I've strived to do that. Obviously, I'm not always perfect at it, but that one rare, like totally missionary experience with the Book of Mormon on the plane, I will never forget. And I don't think the point of that interaction, like I said, was maybe necessarily conversion. I think that at the end of the day, even if it was just one child of God speaking to another and just having a really good conversation, that's all it needed to be. And I think that that's a big reason why I felt so good after that conversation was, yes, because I acted on a prompting, followed a prompting, but also I just had an opportunity to really talk to someone and learn about them and find out that they were a pretty great person, actually. And it was just neat. Like, he was very kind to me, my friend on the plane, as I'm calling him. And yeah, I hope that his day was made better for it, because mine certainly was. I just know that acting on a prompting is always a good thing. And we don't have to know the why behind it. We don't have to know the end of the story. In fact, do any of us know the end of any story? Even when, we think we do, things are constantly evolving. So I think the point is that we do what God asks us to do, and that we be brave enough to take action. So I hope that, I don't know, I hope that maybe in some way me sharing this gives you, whoever's listening to this, some courage to just openly talk about your beliefs and not be ashamed about it. And just know that God's going to bless you for standing as his witness. Because I know that he blessed me in those couple of days there in California, just for taking one small step and opening my mouth. And I think that good things can come from that. So I'll pull a missionary move here and leave you with that challenge to just open your mouth, just talk openly about your beliefs, share something with someone. And I can promise you that he's going to bless you for that. So anyway, thank you. Thank you for letting me recount my little story on an airplane. I'll never forget reading 3 Nephi 11 out loud on an airplane. And who knows, maybe I'll get the opportunity to do it again sometime. But I hope that you all have a really great week. And next week, we look forward to having Jason back with us. Thanks so much for listening. We will catch you next time. Bye.